Hi guys, welcome back to I Will Go Down with the Ship. I am Heather,
And I'm Chelsea.
and today we are going to be talking about episode 6, The Trap from Fallout. But before we do that, let's do a quick writing update. Chelsea, how is it going for you?
It's going. It's going. Um, it's just so hot and miserable right now that like my brain and body don't want to do anything because it's okay. I live on the Alabama Gulf Coast. Let me just state that. So it's like 95, 96, 97 degrees down here. But then you factor in the roughly 1 billion% humidity, and it's like walking around in hot soup all day long. And I just like want to lie in front of my air conditioner and do exactly zero things except for this podcast right now.
Right? Or I mean, watch
Like,
Fallout, of course.
yeah. Like watch Fallout and do this podcast, and like that's kind of where my energy is right now. But I will later tonight, after I get some day job things done, be writing tomorrow's episode of Deceit and Desire and getting it posted. And
Oh,
Zoe and Roman maybe pivot again.
as usual.
They just like reached a good place with their energy before I really wanted them to. So now I'm having to lean more into the all right, you're both being investigated for murder potentially. And then there's also this famous rich actor who's trying to buy her family's ranch, and her dad is never going to sell, obviously. And so, like, she and Roman have to back her dad up on that. And then, like, we're bringing dad home from the hospital also. And it's just a lot.
Well, I
But,
think that that's important too because I think that a lot of the times we don't see couples, especially in mainstream media, be together, like, and then be like a couple. Like we see that with Rip
right,
and Beth, but it's almost like without being insulting to Hollywood writers, like they don't know how to give us a good romance once the characters get together. Like the first thing that they have to
right,
introduce is cheating, breakups, some like really dramatic, oh, let's, kill off a kid or whatever. And the fact that Roman and Zoe have their energy good together, you've introduced conflicts that can challenge them as a couple without threatening their relationship. And I think that that's like something
right.
solid.
And I didn't want them to resolve their issues between each other as quickly as they have, but like that's just kind of how the story was going and what the characters were dictating to me.
Yeah.
So it's really shifting from that conflict between them to, okay, somebody's trying to force us out of this property, and one or the other or both of us might end up in prison if we don't prove that we are innocent beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Hmm. Well, that'll be a fun episode.
Oh yeah,
So what's your
that will
goal
be a
for
fun.
this week?
Um, so 1,200 words. I've got two more 600 word episodes to do, and like while I am doing my ADHD shiny new object syndrome, spinning 1,000 plates at once bullshit, which I'm constantly doing, let's be honest. Like, I'm gonna have to be a little bit more low key and like writing slower, but still trying to stick to the Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule on Vela. And that's just kind of gonna be how it has to be until I get some other loops closed, because my brain is about 867 open loops at any given time,
Yep.
with more spawning at every given moment. So it's like running a CPU with roughly a bajillion tabs open. And every time I complete a project, I this is a thing that I'm working on with the chronically ill creative, and deciding when you need to choose sleep, when you need to recover, what you need to give your energy to and when, but also the fact that because I'm spinning so many plates, every time I complete a project, I never take the time to celebrate that win. It's always like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next
I'm the
obstacle? What's
same
the next
way.
thing?
Yeah.
And I don't ever take time to celebrate those wins. And it contributes to A, the productivity guilt, and B, this like never ending line of exhaustion because there's no high point of like, oh, cool, I finished this thing. That's awesome. Let's be excited about it before I'm like moving on to the next thing. And like, what do I have to do next? And it's exhausting. It's draining on my energy. And I'm really having to take and work on being kinder to myself and also celebrating the little the little wins, not just the big wins, but the little wins too. Because I like we haven't talked about this before on the podcast, but I do struggle with chronic illnesses on top of, everything else I have going on. I have multiple diagnoses. I've got ADHD, which I am counting in this because it contributes heavily to brain fog, fatigue, executive dysfunction, things like that. But I've also got non serum rheumatoid arthritis. I've got microscopic colitis. I have central serous chorioretinopathy with my eyes. And if I ever get like triggered, like it's a that the CSCR is something that comes and goes, and there are certain things that can trigger it, but like my migraine disorder can trigger it, high stress can trigger it, high blood pressure can trigger it, but I have basically blood vessels in my eyes will rupture and then the blood will settle behind my macula in my eye and causes separation, which causes blind spots, which makes it very hard to read, write, to developmental edit, to do any of those things. And there are certain things that can trigger it, like high stress, high blood pressure, hormone changes, things like that. And I've been struggling with it a lot more since I had my total thyroidectomy in January of 2023. I don't have a thyroid anymore. I rely completely on synthetic thyroid hormones. And we still haven't gotten my numbers good into a happy place yet, more than a year later. Like they're not where the doctors want them to be. I, have no energy and really don't feel good. And like the one positive of it is like you guys can't really see my scar unless I point it out.
Yeah.
But I have PCOS also. And the hormone changes from having the thyroid taken out affects the PCOS, which affects migraines, which affects like it's all this big web, and it's a mess of comorbid chronic illness conditions. And then, I also have type 2 bipolar, which means I have manic periods and then I have depressed periods also. And they can go on for very long periods of time. It's not quick swings back and forth usually. Like it's either a long while on either one, whichever one I'm in at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a lot. And in the past, I have tended to just want to ignore the fact that I have ADHD and rheumatoid arthritis and CSCR and PCOS and microscopic colitis and all of these things going on and just push myself like push, 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 push because like I feel bad. What if I feel worse later and then can't do anything at all? And I've really had to pull back the reins and examine that productivity guilt and like why I feel the need to be productive all the time.
Yeah.
Why don't I celebrate the wins when I do complete something? Why is it always just, okay, what's the next thing? And it's, which has ironically created more shiny new object syndrome and a new thing that I'm working on with the Chronically Ill Creative newsletter and Facebook group and trying to create resources to help other people like me slow down, examine the productivity guilt and like why we feel the need to do that, why we push ourselves and make the burnout cycle worse. Like, when we get that burst of energy, we way overdo it because I never know when I'm going to feel good enough to do things again. But then way overdoing it, like you crash you burn out, and it takes even longer to recover from, and it's kind of just a vicious cycle that I'm trying to nip in the bud
Yeah.
while also spinning all these other plates, because I do want to close all of the loops that I have open, and there's so much that I want to accomplish, but I have to start doing it in a way that is healthy for me as a person with chronic health issues.
Mm-hmm. And it is possible.
It is.
Yeah.
But I've got to stop doing my, like, the thing that I am absolutely the world's worst about is like, oh, I've got energy, I'm gonna ride this fucking freight train into a canyon and like just take it for all it's worth, and then you have to pull yourself out of the wreckage at the bottom of the canyon and work your way, not cannon, canyon, and then work your way back up to feeling semi-normal because you pushed way too hard. And it's a lot, but it's something that I'm really actively looking at and trying to change because it's not sustainable for me or for my creative practice.
That's, I think that that's a really admirable thing that you're doing, because I'm sure it's even hard to examine something like that when you're so used to the behavior, and the behavior itself has actually, in a way, you have accomplished so many things. So changing that behavior can be kind of scary, because it's like, well, what if I don't accomplish as much? And so like the fact that you are like, no, I need this regardless of everything, like that's a really brave thing to do.
It's terrifying. It is like bone shakingly scary to take a look at it, but like I have to. Like I'm at a point in my life where I have to do things in a way that is sustainable, or all of the plates that I'm spinning are going to come crashing to the ground and none of the loops are going to get closed,
Yeah.
because I'm eventually going to ride that freight train into the canyon and I'm not going to be able to crawl out of the wreckage because
Right.
it's going to be devastating at some point.
And
And
it's
it's,
good.
you know,
No, go
it's
ahead.
been devastating before, but like it's going to be worse at some point if I do not stop this
Well,
behavior and
uh,
work to change.
and the fact that you're taking care of it now is important. Like you're getting ahead of it before it gets to be past the point of no return.
Exactly.
And the fact that
But it's
you're
hard.
willing, yeah, well, and the fact that you're willing to do it and share the resources, like just you want to be able to help people while you're helping yourself, I think is also really admirable too. Because I haven't heard of
Exactly.
anything like this, you know, specific to either creatives or writers, you know. So I think what you're
Yeah.
doing
And
is
it's,
great.
there's so many people in my circle, like Kat, like Nicole, like Jess, like a lot of my besties also have one or more chronic illnesses and are creatives.
Right.
And we've talked about how exhausting it can be to try to explain to someone who doesn't have any of these conditions, who might be waiting on things from us, like why you need to wait. And then, you know, they'll say things like, oh, you don't look sick, which is like a whole other rant that we're not even going to get into
Yeah.
today. But trying to work with people and clients who do not understand where we are coming from with this chronic illness stuff and the different ways that it impacts us deeply, even though it might not be visible, can be really frustrating. And like that's, I wanted to create a safe space, which is why I created the Facebook group for creatives with chronic illnesses to come and like, you know, like vent and talk to each other and help each other out and like help each other through these situations where you like you have clients that are frustrated, that are like, you know, waiting on things from you and don't understand why you can't just get your shit together and push through it, but like you physically can't.
And
And
if anyone wants to join, we'll put the Facebook group in the show notes for sure.
oh, absolutely, for sure. But like I wanted to create that space where we can talk about those things and about how frustrating it can be to have people who don't have your conditions, don't know what it feels like, don't understand, try to tell you you don't look sick, just push through it,
Right.
which makes everything worse.
Right.
And so that's like it just kind of lit a fire inside me when I was talking to Kat and Nicole both this week. And like, it's not pressures coming from our jobs directly, but like, it's pressures that are programmed into our brains, I think, from a very young age, because some of the generations that have come before us, like, they did equate worth with productivity. And you did not have value as a person if you were not being productive and contributing in some way. And even as creatives, like, we've taken this programming, and we worry about it and having anxiety about it, even if our clients are being very patient and kind, because we can't do something for them right now because we're in the middle of a flare up or whatever. Like, we still have that programmed voice in the back of our head that tells us, you don't look sick, you should just be able to push through this, why can't you get your shit together? Like, and it's not even necessarily coming from, your day job or the client or your boss or whatever. Like, it's just there in your head from childhood, and it's a cycle that, like, we're working to try to break. Now, granted, there are some workspaces that are still toxic and do still feel that way, but working in creative spaces, it's better, and people tend to be more understanding, or at least that has been my experience. But we still have that guilt that just eats away at us anytime we have to take time for ourselves because we are sick, we are having a flare up, we can't function, we can't figure out what our next step is because of executive dysfunction. Even there have been people in the past who haven't been understanding about that, and they live in our fucking heads rent free. And that's something that, like, we have to work to break those cycles in our heads, even if people in our personal lives or our business lives aren't actively pushing those. And sometimes people who are very well meaning do still push those views. But just because you mean well doesn't mean it lands well.
Right.
And it's just something that I wanted to address with each other as a community, is like, we have to stop thinking like this and stop holding ourselves to neurotypical standards, to the standards of healthy people who do not have chronic illnesses. And we have to work in a way that is sustainable for us and sort of break the guilt cycle with productivity.
I think too, because my grandfather came from the Depression. And so the way that I was raised was very much hard work is equal to success. So if you work hard, you're going to succeed. And I'm a big believer in that. This is what I'm trying to teach my kids. But I also think that there is, what really tripped me up personally is, if it's easy, then I haven't earned it. And so for me, like, writing is easy. And so there's that guilt of earning money because I don't feel like I've earned it. And I think in terms of perception, it's like, I don't have a chronic illness, so I can't pretend to know what that feels like. But I'm sure, like, you guys are working hard, even if you're comparing it to someone, a client or whoever, who doesn't have everything that you have, or even one of the things that you have. I don't think that that's fair to you. And so I on the outside want you to know that you are working hard. Like, it's just a different level than what is deemed okay. And I think that perception is what needs to shift. I think that you are, like, completely 100% valid. I think that everyone who needs that break should take that break, because I know who you are. You're not faking this. You're not, oh, I'm going to take a break and then take 3 more extra days. Like, you are working hard. You're doing more than what you should be doing. I get messages for like 2-3 o'clock in the morning with you working on our podcast, or you're writing. And so it's like, I think too that everyone seems to have hard work equals this, but the truth of the matter is we all define what our hard work is. And so when you say you need to celebrate, what you're doing every day is hard work. And you haven't even included the fact that you're a mom, that you're a wife, that you have a house you want to clean, food you want to cook, whatever, like your daily, your day to day. And on top of everything else. And so I think that creating this space where people who have something that might seem like limiting to them, they can talk and they can, like, hey, how do I handle a client who says this? Or, hey, I had a really bad flare up. Or, hey, like even celebrating wins in the Facebook group. Like, hey, I wrote 600
Right.
words. Like, I'm going to celebrate that with you guys because I feel like I can here, like, I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think
Exactly.
that's what we need to change, because I think, like I said, I think that hard work does equal that success, but the definition of what is actually hard work is different for everyone, and that's okay for it to be different for everyone. Like, we don't need to set that
Right.
standard the same, because not everybody is the same. So, for sure.
Exactly. And then like when you have a chronic illness and or are neurodivergent, like it also takes a certain amount of effort that is not necessarily there for people who don't have those issues, but to like take care of yourself,
Yeah.
to, like there'll be days where I'm like, I don't even have time to like take a fucking shower and wash my hair because I have so many things I need to get done. And then I'm going to have to disrupt my whole entire workflow to do this thing to take care of myself. And that is such a toxic headspace to be in.
Or it's like, for me,
I think
sometimes
I've
it's
got to
like,
work to break.
no, for me, it's like, do I get that extra 20 minutes of sleep, or do I take that shower sometimes because I'm so busy
Right,
during the
exactly.
day? Yeah. And it's so silly. And it's like, I don't, and it's like, it's just 20 minutes. And it's like, sometimes I feel like, yeah, yeah, like I totally get what you're saying. But yeah, I think that what you're doing is great. And like I said, we'll put it in the show notes if anyone feels compelled to join. I think what Chelsea, like, you don't have to necessarily be like an indie author. You can be a fanfic author. You can be anyone who feels like you want to come to this place and just hang out with other people and talk, you know?
Right. And like, artists, whatever, like whatever your medium is,
Mhm.
you are absolutely welcome. Like, even if you're just a person in the fandom who like isn't necessarily a creative, but you need a space to exist where you don't have these neurotypical healthy standards put on you and you need that community, you're absolutely welcome.
Well, and I think that that's why we did this podcast, and that's why we're doing our fandom Fridays. And we just love talking to the fandom and just being like, hey, I acknowledge you. Like, the work that you're doing, for like, you are guys are doing a service to this fandom. And so we want to talk to you about it. We want to talk about your process, and we want to talk, we'll see, and all things Fallout, and Ella and Walton and Aaron and just everybody. And I just think that we want to create this space where it's like, there's no judgment. Like, we're all here, and we may not be going through the same things, but we have this place to vent if we need to vent. Or like, oh, if you're dealing with like an anti who was kind of being a dick, it's like, come talk about it. Like, that's why we have a Discord.
Right.
That's why, and it's just like, I feel like we don't see this in fandom spaces. I feel like fandoms are like this dirty little secret that all people tend to make their money off of, but aren't actually willing to listen to or acknowledge a lot of the times. Like, it's easily dismissed, like, oh, they're so obsessed with that fandom. They're so ridiculous. And it's like, do you not know how most men are with their football teams? And like, that's socially acceptable, but we can't be super into our fandoms. And I think that,
Oh yeah.
like,
And like
yeah,
I've got some mockery from people like who, all right, first of all, let's just say all middle schoolers are shitty and catty. Like,
yeah,
let's just get that out of the way. Like, none of us know how to be good people when we're in middle school, generally speaking. And like I caught so much shit from certain people in my life who call themselves my friends. And like I'm just gonna have this little rant because I've been so passionate about fandom for so many years, and this is the first time that I have felt that this is a safe, valid space for me to be excited about these things
Mhm.
without somebody throwing shade at me for liking it or for not being as big of a fan as they are, not knowing every single detail about it, or like enjoying the shit out of a song and loving it, but I don't know the fucking title of the song. Like, excuse the shit out of me. I didn't fucking Google it. Sorry. Like, but the Star Wars original trilogy has always been like, one of my OG fandoms and a thing that I've loved for my whole life. And I used to like tell my friends all the time, like, how great it was. Like, we've got to watch these movies. And they would always like sort of find ways to weasel out of it. And this is going to be fucking controversial. Like, we're going to a controversial place
Just do
today.
it. Why not?
Sorry. But, and this may just be my perspective and like how I'm viewing it, but I told them for years and years and years how great the Star Wars original trilogy was, and they refused to listen to me. And then they want to come back years later when a man with a penis who they happen to be fucking is into Star Wars and tell me how great Star Wars is. And I'm like, I fucking know. I told you that like for years and years and years, and you didn't want to listen to me. So is it that I don't have a penis? Or like what where's the disconnect? Because I was so excited about this stuff and you guys used to make fun of me for it or ignore me or blow me off. But when the guy that you're sleeping with likes it, all of a sudden it's cool. And like it kind of just ruffled my feathers in a big way. And it's probably like petty and shitty of me to talk about it, but it really hurt my feelings because it felt like my views were invalidated because I was a female in the fandom. And they didn't want to hear it from me because I was a girl. But
I
it was fine to hear it from a dude.
Yeah, I think as females in, and let me just say, I love men. I love men. I love men so much. But there are times that in male spaces, and I think like there's a huge difference between, let's say, fandom or not fandom, but like Fallout and Bridgerton, right? Those are two different
Right?
spaces. And so I feel like if we, as women, sometimes we are drawn to different things than men, and I'm fine with that. I love our differences, and that's fine. I might not be drawn to Fallout because it's post-apocalyptic or it's a wasteland. I might be drawn to it because I saw a trailer and I'm like, oh, I love the Ghoul and Lucy already, and I really want to see how that dynamic plays out. And I respect that everyone has their passions. What I don't like is that I'm not taken seriously because of what I'm focusing on within the fandom. If I want to focus on the potential romance between two characters, let me focus on that potential romance between two characters. That doesn't invalidate me as a Fallout fan. I am a fan of the story. I am a fan of the world building. I don't game. That's just not something that I do. And I am okay with that. I'm not here trying to claim that I know everything about Fallout, nor am I saying that the games are irrelevant. They are completely relevant, and I respect the fact that the games exist. But I don't want to be dismissed as like sort of like a fangirl, like who is just, oh, you just think Walton Goggins is hot, and so I'm not going to take you seriously. And that has kind of, I felt that same way about being a really big sports fan or a hockey fan. And it's like, oh, well, you only know the hot guy on the team. And it's like, actually, no, I don't. I know the whole team. I will recite them for you. And I know all about hockey, and so, and it's like I feel like I have to prove myself. And let me be completely honest, like if men feel that way in like something like a Bridgerton space, like I don't want that for men either. Like I want everyone to just be able to join fandoms, and in like whether you know every single thing about a fandom or whether you're just here for the vibes, like I want to be that welcoming space. Like, hey, you love
Right.
Fallout? Me,
Exactly.
I do too. Like, let's hang out and talk about it. And you don't have to prove anything to me. I don't care if you're here because you love Max and Lucy. I don't care if you're here because you love the video game. I care because you care and we're caring about this media. And it's like, if the show or the writers or even the actors are dismissive of that, I feel like that's what hurts fandoms. And so it's like, if
Yep.
you're talking about something like Star Wars, if you have the Star Wars fandom, you know, raising concerns, I feel like you don't have to necessarily change whatever plan you're doing, but give them the respect to at least acknowledge them without reducing them to a label or something or dismissing them completely, because it's like, where do you think your money is going to come from? Like I'm already
Right.
like buying shirts of the Ghoul. Like I am ready to like buy this on digital, like on top of having my Amazon Primes. Like when Pirates of the Caribbean came out and I was like middle school up to high school, it was like I don't know how much money I spent on that shit, but I had Jack Sparrow Pez. Like I will put my money where my mouth is, as long as you treat me like a person and respect that I am passionate about whatever fandom I choose to be. And I think that, again, this is why we do the podcast, is because we want to be that space, whether, and while we do focus on the romance, that's our big thing, and we're not going to apologize for it. That is going to be our primary focus. We are also writers, and so we're looking at the stories. This is what we're going to be talking about in especially this episode, because Lucy and Cooper are not on screen together, but the writing and the episode is just so good that, of course, we're going to just break it down. And so I just want I want, as someone who is part of a fandom, to be respected by other people in the fandom, but also to be respected by the people creating the fandom. And if you're on the outside of the fandom, don't just write me off because, oh yeah, I think Walton Goggins is hot. Like, okay, he's hot. Like that is a fact. Like, but the show can still
Yeah,
be
it's a
good.
factual statement,
Yeah.
and the show is still good. The show is fucking excellent, let's be honest.
Right.
Like, Prime comes out swinging so hard with first seasons of their shows. Like, the first season of Fallout was absolutely fucking incredible. I loved it. The first season of Reacher was absolutely
Reacher
excellent.
was
I
good.
adored everything about it. Like, I loved season 2 also, but
Season one
slightly
had
different
its
vibe.
charm. Yeah, I think the season one had its
Yeah.
charm, and the Chris Pratt one I
Yeah.
really liked too. I can't remember the name of the Chris Pratt one. I liked that one.
But I loved O'Donnell in the second season of Reacher. Like, I loved this little like band of brothers type of feel we had with Reacher and his old crew coming back together, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic, and I loved that energy. But like, as a Southern girl, I really loved the vibe
Yeah,
of the first season. Like, I live in a small town, and I just like kind of got it on a
yeah,
molecular level, and it really vibed hard with me in that first season. And the second season wasn't written any worse than the first season.
no,
It's just, like I vibed harder with the first season as a girl from a small southern town. And like, can I just say how much I love Roscoe? I love her so much.
me
Like,
too. I love her too. She's actually a really well written female character. I
she is.
loved
She is
her.
gold. I
Yeah,
love her.
yeah. I was I was anyway. We won't talk about season two, but
Right.
yeah. Okay, so why don't we dive in? Um, so this is episode 6, The Trap. Let me ask you, I was watching it with the title in mind. What do you think the trap is in reference to?
I'm gonna get crazy person on you for a second, but like there's
Okay,
several different ways that we could take this.
I want to hear it.
And like with, there's obviously the surface level, Lucy and Max, both falling through the floor and the like beware falling objects thing in
Mhm.
Vault 4, all of that,
Mm.
etc. But I think that the trap really is going back to what we discussed with Mon in her interview yesterday. It hasn't released yet, sorry guys, but when you see it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Is falling into the trap of judging a book by its cover.
Oh, interesting.
And like, because Lucy and Maximus both have these views of Vault 4 coming into it that are kind of differing and pulling in different directions from each other. And then what goes down in this episode really changes Lucy's view a little bit. And it's one of those like, you judged a book by its cover, Max judged a book by its cover. And then here's the actual situation. And I think the trap is A, believing the information you're fed at face value,
Okay.
first of all.
Yeah.
And then B, like judging a book by its cover is a mistake.
Yeah. And we'll get into that because I have so many notes about this episode. I want to say I did miss our Volties. It felt weird without
I did
Norm and
too.
Chet. So,
I love Norm so much.
I know. But
I
anyway,
love the opening scene in this though.
oh, with
Like,
Cooper in black and white, it was
yes,
so typical 50s. I love that he was smoking a cigarette. But like I love that it's Vault 4. And again, we get that mirror. Like Cooper is literally standing in Vault 4, and this is where Lucy falls
into.
into it. And I'm sorry, I put a note. I was like, oh my gosh, the wink when he saw like the rats and the reds. He did that little wink. I was
Right?
like,
And the wait, that was adorable.
stop being so charming, sir. But I thought that it was really interesting because we get some information about Vault 4, which was essentially that the scientists they have a 5-year sort of voluntary trial where they're studying the effects of radiation on human cells. And I don't know about you, Chelsea, but I felt like when they were kind of doing their television spot, the male scientist seemed like it was almost like he was being forced to say what he was saying. Like the girl was fine, the woman was
Right.
fine, but it felt like for the dude, it was like I don't know. That's just kind of I got the impression about that.
I felt like he was really having to choose his words carefully and sanitize what he was saying versus what he
Mm,
is actually planning to do with these experiments
yep.
once they get in Vault 4.
Yep. And we learn right now that if you want to protect yourself and your family, that you can purchase a residence within the vault. And then so we cut the commercial. It goes into color, which I thought was again brilliant. And then we get our first introduction to Bud Askins. So who is Bud Askins, Chelsea?
Bud is Barb's boss, or like one of Barb's bosses at Vault Tech. There's still a boss that we have not laid eyes on yet, except in a silhouette. But Bud is all about management.
Yes.
And he is he's the one that did the deal with Robco to get the Pit Boys for Vault Tech and all this kind of stuff. And he's got his little obsession with management, and management is the key to winning the future and all of that kind of stuff. And I just
So I
love it.
actually took notes on this because I don't know if this is going to come back, but he was from West Tech, which was a defense contractor, and they designed the T
Right.
armor that Cooper wore in the war. Uh, but there was a big design flaw that they kind of overlooked
Yes.
and didn't care about, and Cooper kind of called him out on it, which was good to see. Because Cooper
And
Howard.
Bud was so dismissive of the
Oh
design
yeah,
flaw. Like that's
exactly.
not what I'm focusing on now.
Yeah.
Like I'm focusing on this thing instead.
And he talks about the ultimate weapon to destroy competition is time. That time is the ultimate weapon, and that management and time. Can I just say really quick, I took personal offense to the sheer discomfort on Barb's face when Cooper is like literally giving her the affection. Like he wraps his
Affection.
arms
Yeah.
around her from behind and kisses her, and she's like, I'm at work. And I'm like, bitch, so is he. So was he. He was just
Right?
doing a commercial for
Literally.
you. It's like,
And he's literally never done that for anyone before until you asked. And now, yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm
yeah,
with you.
I took personal offense to that. And then what pissed me off, and this is just, okay, maybe this is just because I'm a wife and like me and my husband communicate, maybe over communicate sometimes. But it's like she plans this wrap party at their house that she doesn't
And
even,
springs it on him.
yeah, she doesn't even tell Cooper about it. And he just goes with it. And I'm like, dude, like you're allowed to say something here. Like you can be like, hey, okay, I got you, but we're gonna have a conversation because you should be telling me this stuff as your husband. And I'm like, Cooper, I love you. And I think that you're a really good husband. But then part of me is like, I don't want a yes man either. And I think that that's why I'm really
No.
drawn to the ghoul who'd be like, who would not tolerate that shit, like whatsoever.
Right, exactly.
Um,
Like, and Lake
so
and I communicate a lot too. Like, and I cannot even imagine setting something like that up at our house without consulting him first. Like,
right,
no,
right,
no.
exactly. And it's like literally the day of, like in 2 hours or whatever. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
She
And
didn't
then
tell him because she was afraid he would say no, and she just did it to get her way.
I think also she takes advantage of the fact that she knows he's going to go along with anything she says. I think that that is the nature of their relationship. Like, I think in episode 1 or 2, I was like, I think Barb basically wears the pants in that. But even he says, the things I'm willing to do for you manage to amaze even me. And I'm like, stop it, Cooper. Stop. Like, love you. And the way that Walton delivers that line, I'm just like, oh. And then I was like, can we get 30 seconds of appreciation? And Walton, I was going to say Walton Cooper. I was like, a Cooper Howard in that black outfit that he wears to the party. I was like, oh, that was
Yeah.
good wardrobe
There
choice,
were
guys.
some serious, like, Humphrey Bogart, Bing Crosby, Dean Martin vibes with
Yes.
that. And I was
Yes.
so here for it. Like, yes, sir. Mm.
Um, and then unfortunately, Roosevelt cannot come to the party, which again, we have a big setup there. And
It makes me
um,
so mad.
yeah, I'm like, poor fucking Roosevelt. He can't do shit in this house.
Right? I know. And I'm like, Cooper, stand up for your dog, man. Come on.
Yeah, and then we get some sea bass, who I love. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Cooper's only friend who comes to the party, like no one else is there. Bunch of bitches, like, fuck you.
Right.
And so basically that tells us that everyone who is at that party is there specifically for Barb.
Vaultic
And
and Barb.
exactly. So we find out that Cooper actually lost a movie because of the commercials he is doing for Vault-Tec. That the actors would not come out of their trailers. And it's because people don't want to be around him because he's essentially trying to sell people on the end of the world. And I don't think that Cooper Howard really took the time to realize just what he was selling because I feel like that would bother him. But and we'll see this later on in the episode when we talk about fiduciary responsibility. But I think that he just sees it as his wife asking him for a favor. And she's not going to explain why the commercial is
Right.
needed, what the goal of the commercial is, because she continues to withhold all of this information from Cooper. So yeah, so Seabass and Cooper are talking, and Seabass is all like, the future is products. You're a product, I'm a product. The end of the world is a product. And if you can embrace that, everything is golden. And
That
they,
was such a fantastic line. Oh my
yep.
God.
And they toast to the future, which I think is, I'm toasting it too, because you're going to meet Lucy in the future, baby. So your future is
Right.
bright. And And then we get back to the ghoul. So what's going on with the ghoul right now, Chelsea?
Okay, so he is, first of all, stoned out of his mind because he went a little bit overboard on the chems
Overboard is
when
being so
he,
nice about it.
yeah, like he went a little crazy with the chems and he's stoned the hell out of his mind. And the president of the government
I
has
love that.
sent some deputies to to bring him in for destroying the super duper mart. And can I just say how much I love that, like, technically he didn't, or at least not entirely, and he damn sure didn't do that by himself, but he is absolutely willing to take 100% of the credit for it and take the fall for that,
Oh yeah, for
and like
Lucy.
not mention at all that Lucy is the one that set all the ghouls loose, that like
And-
she fucked some shit up in that super duper mart, which was excellent, by the way.
yeah.
And like he's just like, nah, it was me.
Well, and it's interesting to me because I was trying to take off my shipper goggles to be like, why would he do that? Like, if we're not looking at it from that perspective, what would he do that for? And I'm like, I don't even think he knows he's ever going to see her again. Like, you know what I mean? I
Right.
think that he understands after he found out her name that their paths might cross because they're both, or at least, I mean, Cooper's looking for his family. And he wanted the bounty to get to Moldaver. Like he wants to get to Moldaver, but he doesn't know that Hank was kidnapped by Moldaver at this point. And so I just think that I'm just like, why would he take the fall for it? Like, why wouldn't he want anyone to know that she's out there? And so again, I don't obviously my shipper heart says, oh, it's because he's being protective of her. Like it's almost like he's not obligated, but like he's kind of doing her this favor too of like, you saved my life, so I'm going to try and keep you alive in the way that I know how. But I haven't seen a reason outside of that to explain why he would take that, you know?
Right.
So,
And like, yeah, it could be a tit for tat with like, okay, she got me the vials, golden rule, blah blah blah. So I'll stick up for her with this. But like, let's look at him as a character and his track record. Like, I don't
yeah,
see him doing that for anybody else.
right. No, absolutely not. And speaking of the golden rule, I was like messaging Chelsea today because we were when Vault 33 had sort of like their meeting about what to do with the Raiders. I completely missed this even in the rewatch, but Norm stands up when they're talking about what should we do with the Raiders. And he specifically says, why don't we do to them what they would have done to us? And I was like messaging Chelsea and I'm like, I really want to talk about this concept of the golden rule because Betty completely dismisses that. So that is the thing. Is the golden rule only applicable when it's something positive? If Norm knew, everyone knew 100% that those raiders were going to kill everyone in Vault 33. And the only reason they were stopped is because they were essentially tranquilized. Why do they not apply that same golden rule to doing the same thing to them? Like, I would really
Right.
like to understand that philosophy.
I think that it goes back to Hammurabi's law, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And I think that Hammurabi's law is the other side of the golden rule coin.
Yeah.
And the golden rule is very like bright and shiny and positive and do unto others as you would have done unto you. Whereas Hammurabi's law is, okay, they have done unto you in this way that's not so nice, give it back to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's really interesting because it's like you said, it's the same coin. It's just two different sides. And who's flipping the coin and what side do we pick? But I think that was really interesting. So we get back to Vault 4. They get the ammunition out of Max. So we see Lucy and Max again. And what's interesting here, I didn't really catch this on my first watch, but Vault 4 has surface foragers, I think is what Birdie called them, where
Yes.
they go up, people from Vault 4 go up on the surface and forage for things. And Lucy realizes that this vault is very different than her vault.
From her vault.
Yeah, because she finds out that Birdie was actually born on the surface and that
Sunshine Sands.
exactly, and that Vault 4 took them in. And so my question then is like, okay, well, why did Vault 4 take them in? Is it because they're going to use them as experiments? Does that have to do with that setup back in the beginning of the episode where it's like, we want to study radiation poisoning on human cells? And so they're willing to take in surface dwellers to study that radiation. I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on
think that might have been the initial idea, but with the experiments in Vault 4 that were experimented on by the scientists having risen up and overthrown the scientists, I think that changed the trajectory and how Vault 4 is doing things somewhat.
So why would you take in the surface dwellers? Like, what do you think their reasons are?
The overseer says it's a policy from before my time. And I think that the experiments who rose up and overthrew the scientists felt badly for the people on the surface and the ways in which they may have suffered. And that is why they opened Vault 4 and offered sanctuary there.
Yeah.
And healthcare and things like that, because it's kind of going back to the golden rule kind of thing.
Yeah.
Do unto others as you would have done unto you. And like these scientists did horrible things to the current Vault 4 residents' ancestors.
Right.
And I think that those ancestors, once they revolted and overthrew the scientists, took a step back and said, we're not going to be like them. Let's take in people from the surface, offer them shelter, offer them a better way of life, offer them the things that we were not offered.
Yeah.
As experiments in this vault. And it just goes back to that golden rule, Hammurabi's law dichotomy.
Yeah. So this is the part where Lucy propositions Max, but I found it really interesting that she only asks him after he tells her that she smells nice.
She smells good.
Yeah. And so I don't think she would have said anything unless he gave her that clear indication that he was interested in her, and she took it to mean maybe something more than it was.
Right.
And when poor baby, poor Max, like
I know. Bless his heart.
The brotherhood is terrible with sex education. Let's just say that. But that tells me like, okay, I know this might be a little like not safe for work or like, but does that mean that he hasn't ever masturbated either?
Right. Like I'm really wondering because he says as a knight of the brotherhood, we're not supposed to.
Right. But even when he's describing that it gets hard like a pimple and then it explodes, if he had gotten himself off before, he would know how normal that was. So I don't think he's
right.
I don't think he's ever done it.
That description is so visceral and literally made me throw up in my mouth a little bit on the first watch through.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Like, that just really shows you like how sex negative the brotherhood is.
Oh yeah.
Versus a very sex positive environment that Lucy grew up in.
Which is funny. Because it's again, I love the contrast, right? Because we're supposed to think that Vault 33 is not a great place. And you know what? There are certain things that it's really bad at, just like there are certain things the surface is really good at. But I love that everything is complex in this world. Like, not everything is bad in Vault 33. Granted, are they fucking their cousins? Yes. But they have good sex education where even Lucy is giving Max sex education. And she's like, no, it's completely normal. Like she says something like, hopefully it happens every time. Like that's
Every
what's,
time, ideally.
yeah,
Yes.
ideally, yes. Um, but I love that she
And
does
they
not,
did have good sex education, but I think that is because they are breeding stock
that's
for the
true.
management from Vault 31.
That
Like, of
is true.
course, they want their breeding stock to be well educated with sex education because
But
that's
tell
what
me
their purpose
why.
is and
But
what
yeah,
they're used to.
so okay, yes, I do. I totally buy into that. My thing is, why are they allowed to experiment and figure out pleasure if their job is just to have kids? Because you don't need
Because
pleasure
they
to
want them
have
to
the kids.
have
Oh,
the
maybe
illusion
enjoy
of
it.
a normal, wonderful life and like enjoy being breeding stock. Yes.
Yeah, enjoy like having the kids and the develop. Yeah, like everyone's husband's like, oh, I enjoyed making the kid, right? Like, okay, I get that. That makes sense. Um, And I love that she doesn't take the rejection personally. Like her face
Right.
doesn't flinch. She doesn't like she doesn't even like blink. Like it's like, okay, I'm not it is what
Okay,
it is.
cool.
Yeah. So that's how I feel like my theory on Lucy right now with Max is that she thinks that she should want Max because he ticks off all the boxes, but the actual feelings of lust, desire, passion, and love to a degree, she's not experiencing that. And so it's so easy to like wash it all off because she
Right.
thinks this is, oh, it's consent is important and he doesn't want it and whatever. And I just think that like it's more of that arranged marriage versus falling in love with someone. And
Right.
let me ask you, if you do you think in season 2 she propositions um Cooper?
I think it's going to take her a minute before she does, and we might not get it in season 2. I would love to see it. But I think that if they are going to go balls to the wall and actually do Ghoulsey, which I pray to God every day that they do, I think if they're going to do that, they're going to go slow burn with it.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I love slow burn. That's one of my favorite tropes. I'm all here for it. I don't need Ghoulsey in even season 2. Like I don't need it 100 like right. I don't want it rushed is what I'm trying to say. But
Right. Exactly.
I don't I feel like part of me doesn't want her to proposition him because she cares so much about what he actually thinks of her, which is so different than
Right.
anything she's ever felt before.
I would love to like see him be the one that initiates it rather
I,
than her
I would love that
because
too.
she's shielding herself.
Yeah. She's like scared because all of these I would love it if both of them had these like the pining and the angst and the feelings and being so scared
Right.
because he never thought he would feel like this for someone like her, and she has never felt anything like this before and doesn't understand it and knows that right now he's essentially her lifeline to get her to her dad, so she doesn't want to mess that up. And so like
Right.
I would love that too. So after that, we see Lucy lay on the gurney. She looks up, and what does it say overhead?
I remember there was a beware falling objects sign, but
It's test subjects, the test subject
test
sign.
subject. Yeah, yeah. When
Yes.
it pans up on the door,
Yeah.
it just says test subjects.
Yeah. And then we cut to them in sort of like a mess hall area, kind of that's decorated to be outside, but they're eating. And
Right.
I loved this scene um
It made my
because
eye twitch when she tried to feed Max like a baby, though.
well, I mean, she had to
I
have a conversation about his own penis. So, I mean, what are we doing here?
well, yeah, yeah,
Um,
but it made my eye twitch regardless because I'm just like, oh,
what was
no,
interesting to me is when she's all like, they're talking about he wants to leave, and she's like, no, like you need to rest. You need just we're in a vault, we're safe. Like, just take a few days. You need to rest. And she says something like, um, I need you alive. You're no good to me dead. And then she
I
like there's
love
that
that line.
pause and then she's like, plus I would feel bad. But she says it in such a like almost a glib way that I'm like, are you trying to be ironic? Or because I don't know if Lucy knows how to be ironic
Ironic.
yet. And so I'm just like, again, it's that how I don't understand. To me, that's not flirting. To me, that's saying
Right.
you don't necessarily care. Like you care because you're supposed to. And I think that she wants
Right.
to trust Max and he's nice, but I also think that it's like there's not that connection. And so it's like I would feel bad. Like that's such a weird thing to say. I felt like
Right.
um yeah.
It is. It is.
And I loved when Max, because I will 100% back Max here, is like that this is a cult. Like we're in a cult. And they have this argument over vault life versus surface life. And they're both right, to be
Right.
honest. Like I loved that.
Mhm.
Um, I cringed when they were holding hands, but that's just me being a shipper. Um,
Right.
so then we get introduced to Overseer Benjamin. Ugh, I love him.
Oh God. Like his I love how startled and taken aback Lucy is
Me
by the fact that
too.
A, he's the Cyclops. And she's very non-judgmental about the ghoul's appearance.
Literally have that in my note. I'm like, how come you didn't even flinch when you saw Cooper? And he's still humanoid, but he's still like not normal looking. But then you start
Right.
looking around at everybody like dude with the nose on his forehead and I'm just like, why is it now when you're seeing these facial deformities, which Cooper does have, why didn't you it was so interesting because now all of a sudden she's thinking shit is being weird and Max is all like no, they're too nice. And I thought that that was such a reversal because I was like Max doesn't care what they look like, he cares about their behavior. The behavior is what's
Right.
throwing him off. And Lucy cares about what they look like, whereas the behavior is completely normal. And when she's with Cooper, though, his looks don't matter to her. It's how he treats her. So I'm like, why did you suddenly have this reversal, Lucy? Like, is it because you're sort of back in the safe world that you're used to? Like, I don't know why suddenly she thinks that shit is going, weird or whatever. Um,
Right.
so I thought that that was really interesting. Um,
Yeah, it was a super interesting writing choice, and it 100% goes back to the don't judge a book by its cover thing, because she's fine with everything until she starts seeing, like, okay, why is an extra nose weirder than no nose at all, first of all?
uh-huh,
Let's just look
100%.
at
Is
that.
it because he's in a vault suit, whereas Cooper's surface?
Maybe.
Like, I don't know. Um, so
I
yeah,
think she has this assumption that all the vaults are the same and are exactly like
yes,
her.
I think so
And
too.
that assumption is absolutely obliterated in this
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah, and I think that that's like I think that that's really interesting. And because she starts learning that actually all of the normal people are surface dwellers that have been taken in. And
Right? And the ones that look like they should be mutated because of radiation or whatever from the surface are actually people who grew up in these vaults.
right. Okay, so we see Cooper getting dragged by these deputies. Let's just call a spade a spade. He's letting them drag him. He could have totally taken them
He's
out at this
allowing it
point.
because he wants to see who the president of the government is.
Right.
Like, that's curiosity and interest on his part. And he allows this to happen to him.
Yes. Okay. And then he has it feels the way that the scene is portrayed. He has this flashback to him and Barb in a hot tub. Um, and they have a conversation about does Barb need to have her job? And Cooper's like, I'm thinking about quitting show business, and she's like, well, what would you have me do if I wasn't working for Vault Tech? And he's like, look pretty and raise chickens. And I'm like, sign me up. That sounds like a perfect
Right,
life. I
right,
don't have to do anything. Um, but what's interesting is the whole like the way that Barb is responding to this conversation because even Barb, like I have like even Barb knows that she's doing something shady because
Yeah.
like Cooper gives her a
One of the
look.
good faults.
Yeah, exactly. And she completely gets so defensive of that. And I loved his line, like, we have this one life. Do you really want to spend your 9 to 5 with working with these assholes? And it honestly reminds me of like a lesson that Lucy would say, like, you only have one life, Faulty. Like, do you really want to spend it like following, these like not questioning? Do you really want to spend it literally hiding in the ground and not,
Right.
living your life?
And not learning the true nature of the world. Like,
Exactly.
do
Um,
you really want to continue to live in this indoctrination?
right.
Or do you want to wake up to the real world?
And it's funny because obviously Cooper gets that second chance at life, as the ghoul. And she just completely gets really defensive and she's saying like, oh, she needs a job because it guarantees a spot in one of the good balls. So then he meets his friend in a bar. Do you remember his name? The friend's name? I can't remember it.
Cannot remember the friend's name right now. But also, I want to loop back for just a second and like
Yeah,
Cooper's reaction to one of the good vaults and like, what the fuck is that supposed to mean? Like, I loved the way that he reacted
oh
to
yeah,
that. Like, and this is the first inkling that he's getting. Like, what do you mean? One of
right,
the good vaults? Like, what have you had me selling to the American public on my good name,
right.
on your behalf?
Exactly. Well, and the fact, one of the reasons I love Cooper as a husband, right? Because even though I wish part of me wishes he would kind of stand up for himself a little bit more, is that he trusts her so implicitly that he doesn't even question what are we selling, why are we selling, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like he
Right?
just
He's
goes
doing
with
this
it.
favor for his wife. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I love that. But I think that this is one of the things that he's so mad about, even as the ghoul. And like, this is why he gets so angry with Lucy about her complete faith and her complete trust in whether it's Vault-Tec or her
Max
dad.
or whoever.
Yeah. And it's like you have to start asking questions. And it's almost like pre pre bombs or pre-war Cooper Howard and Lucy are on that same trajectory again. They're both learning that
Mirroring each other.
they're mirroring each other. They're going through that same sort of arc where pre-war Cooper is finding out, okay, shit smells weird. And Lucy is doing the same thing finally within the confines of, oh, the safest place in the world is the vault.
They are both coming up against what a phrase that my grandmother used to say all the time is, there's nothing like a vault lesson. There's nothing like learning the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's hitting both Cooper and Lucy really hard in this episode. And we're seeing it in parallel. Even though they're not getting screen time together in this episode,
Yep.
we see pre-war or pre-nukes Cooper getting this same lesson that Lucy is going through in Vault 4 in this episode.
Yeah, I think that that's a really poignant connection. So we see the friend at the bar, and Cooper meets his friend, this actor friend, who he's not really working anymore because he's been seen at a couple of these sort of communism meetings, which Cooper is completely against. And, for good reason, he went to war to fight against, communism. But they talk about fiduciary responsibility. And basically, what his friend is telling Cooper, which Cooper had, like, Cooper doesn't even know what fiduciary responsibility is. He's like, I play a cowboy on TV. And so the guy breaks it down in a really, really simple way for anyone to understand is basically the safety of the American people has been outsourced to Vault-Tec because the United States is super poor right now. And Vault-Tec has the fiduciary responsibility to make sure their investors get money. How do they do that? By selling spots in a vault. And so if the peace treaties that are currently, the negotiations are going through right now, there's no point of selling vaults because there's not going to be a war, which means vaults are not going to be needed. And so Vault Tech actually has a responsibility to ensure that the peace treaties do not go through. And he's trying to explain this to Cooper. And he gives Cooper a card and he's like, you should come, to this meeting. Just come, and I just thought that like, yeah, that I loved the breakdown going through it a second time, watching it a second time, because it's like you're trying to get so much information. Part of me is watching just to like, okay, I'm checking out Walton Goggins over here, like, whatever. But it's like going back and watching it, it's like, oh shit, like this is a big deal,
There's so much. Like, I just have to applaud how much and like how many clues and Easter eggs they laid in here for us that like you don't necessarily catch that level of detail on your first watch through. But like as you're watching again and again and again, more and more and more things that line up and point in this direction, and you're like, holy fucking shit, like that's a masterclass in setups and payoffs. And like that is the thing that I have loved most about season 1 of Fallout is it is literally a masterclass in good writing, in particular with setups and payoffs and
Yep.
Easter eggs.
Well, and I loved the throwback because Cooper says it sounds like you're in a cult, which is exactly what Max said. And so it's like I love that they both used that word. So then we get another flashback where Hank is now calling Cooper at home. And I loved that. I loved that. He's like, is this Cooper Howard? And Cooper basically like hangs up on him. He's like,
right. I love that. He's like, my wife does not take calls in the evening.
Click. I loved that. Can I just say, I think it's really weird that they're eating dinner without their kid. Like,
yeah, like it's Janie in bed and like they're having dinner together after kiddo is in bed. Like, did you have a nanny feed her dinner earlier? Like, what?
I don't understand that because they only have one kid. And I'm just like, if you're making dinner now, like Janie's like reading Little House on the Prairie to Roosevelt, but I'm just like, why? And I thought that was a little weird, but whatever.
Okay,
But
I'm probably not the only one who got hung up on that.
no, I was like,
for what point and purpose, my friend? Is it just so they can have this heavy ass conversation and not be having it in front of their kid?
I think so too, but
that the writers had to make to facilitate this conversation without it happening in front of Janie.
I feel like they could have done something like Janie ate early, now she's doing homework. Easy peasy. I would have believed that because it's a blessing to get everyone to eat at the same time sometimes. But then we get the bad news that what happens, Chelsea? What is the rule?
There's no dogs in the vaults. And like for me, I would be like, okay, well, not gonna live in a vault. If I burn, I burn. I'm staying with my dog. Bye.
Well, and when I was rewatching this, if you watch Barb, I feel like she's more concerned about Cooper's reaction to the news than she is about Janie's. Like she pauses it, that's like she's like, I'm actually concerned about how Janie's gonna take the news. But as she's looking at Cooper, I feel like, no, like you're worried about how Cooper is gonna take the route. Yeah. And so I feel like
she created that rule. I swear to God, because she avoided his questions about who made that rule so hard that I'm like, Barb fucking did that.
She literally calls it an avoidable inefficiency. I was like, how do you have a dog and call him an avoidable inefficiency? Like, do you have no heart? Like, I just
like that animal lives in your home and loves you and protects you and like, excuse the fuck out of you, avoidable inefficiency.
Right.
No.
So yeah, so when Cooper actually starts pushing back, I thought it was interesting because Barb sighs. And I think she thought, oh, Cooper's just going to go along with this, the way that he goes along with everything.
She expected him to just take whatever pill she was giving him to swallow, and he wasn't going to give her any pushback on it. And she like had no idea that this was going to be his fucking line.
Yeah. And so like I loved that it was his line. Me too. He does not let it go. And when she called it a trivial concern, I got like,
That pissed me off so bad.
oh
I
my
was
gosh.
so angry.
I
Like,
was like, you don't have to agree with
yeah,
his feelings, but you cannot call them trivial. Like, I would be so upset. And he responds and he's like, I went to war to fight for this freedom, and living in a vault would take that away. The fact that Barb like throws Cooper's service in his face when she's all like, while you were at war, I was waiting by the phone and I was getting the mail and blah blah, to gaslight him into feeling
right,
guilty. I was like, bitch, no, no, you
right.
don't do
And
that.
exactly what she was doing is gaslighting him. And like, can we just applaud the fact that like a lot of times in media we see men gaslighting their female partners, but
Mhm.
we don't always get to see female partners gaslighting their male partners and see that done well. But I thought it was done exceptionally well in this show, and I just want to applaud that because this is something that irritates Lake, and he points it out all the time, is like with domestic issues and like domestic violence, even people take it seriously when it's happening to a woman, but they don't always necessarily take it seriously when it's happening to a man.
The same thing if a man is raped. People still don't believe that
Exactly. Like
men can be
people,
raped.
right? And like that people don't take that seriously is infuriating. And I really thought that it was well done showing that that road can go both ways. Like men
Dude,
can be gaslit, men can be
let
victims too, especially in a domestic situation. Like
uh
it,
that is such a good point. Like, let's be honest, if it was Walton doing this to Barb, if it was Cooper doing this to Barb, we would call it either manipulative or emotional abuse. Like,
right,
let's just put it out there. Like, she is emotionally abusing him in a way where it's very manipulative. And I
yep,
feel like as women, without stereotyping, I feel like we're way better at the passive manipulation than men are. And I think that the way that she is doing this, she knows exactly what to throw at him. And I honestly thought, like on that first watch through, that he was gonna stay in his place and like, hold it down, but he doesn't. She, of course, gets the tears in her eyes, and he grabs her, and he's and in
and he
his
apologizes to her, and I'm just
he
like,
apologizes to
bitch.
her. Yeah. Well,
Ooh,
and this is so interesting. So like what he says is, I know you always try to do the right thing. That's what I love about you. And I feel like that is such a parallel to Lucy, because Lucy always is trying to do the right thing. Her golden rule is essentially, I'm going to do the right thing, even if it doesn't benefit me. I want to treat other people the way that I'm going to be treated. And I think that this is again that where this anger but also intrigue at when she sees him. And I'm not saying that she reminds him of Barb in a romantic way, but it's more of like this the Barb that he fell in love with, that pure, genuine, sweet woman, and that he sees so much of that as well as so much of himself. Like you could even say that, you're always trying to do the right thing. Cooper always tries to do the right thing too. Pre-war Cooper always tries to do the right
right.
thing too. And just the fact that he apologized, and I think that, I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but like I feel like the way that Cooper is right now as the ghoul, it might not make sense for his character to apologize for a lot of things, even if they're well deserved. Because I feel like, I used to sort of, I dated this guy before I met my husband, and it was very much like I did not want any confrontation with him because I didn't want him to break up with me. Like, I was so paranoid that this was going to happen. And after we finally did break up, I was I told myself I'm never letting anyone walk all over me ever again. And so the problem with that though is that instead of picking my battles, I picked every battle because I needed to tell myself like I'm not letting him walk over me, right? And so obviously like I figured it out, for the most part. But it's sort of like I feel like Cooper is in a state where he apologized for so much shit that actually wasn't his fault. That part of
Right.
that anger and resentment and bitterness is like, I gave her everything. Like, I apologized for everything, even when I didn't have
Even when he
to.
wasn't wrong.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
that just makes me want to like fight for this man. Like, damn, son. I like as a boy mom, I feel like if my son's wife ever treated my son like that and was wow, I can't even fucking talk. Emotionally manipulating him in this way, like we would have a come to Jesus meeting, me and her.
Yeah. And I just feel like he's going to be so protective because Lucy is so genuine that he's almost going to wonder, is she manipulating me? Like, is she doing this because she can or because she genuinely believes it? And I feel like that's going to be really interesting to watch that play out in season 2.
Right.
So we get back to Vault 4, or no, hang on. Sorry, my notes like jumped around a bit. Okay, so Lucy is talking to Overseer Benjamin, and we learn that he is 5 generations in the vault. Like he descends from people within the vault. And like you said, it's a policy to take refugees in, which he does not agree with. But he specifically says, in order to get elected or something like that, you have to play nice and keep up those traditions. And so I'm wondering if that's why Betty and the other two, if they took in the Raiders specifically for that, or if they have a completely different set of rules. Because I do believe what you're saying. I think each vault is different, all because of like the different experiments that they're gonna run on people. But
Oh my God, I just got hit with such a hardcore theory that just blew my damn mind.
let's hear it.
Okay, so you remember that Vault 32, they say that it was raiders or that they all turned on each other, blah, 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 blah. But literally, the death to management that was painted on the wall in the overseer's office in Vault 32, I honestly feel like maybe our core group of buds from Vault 31, it may have been the ones that killed off everybody in 32 when the people in 32 found out the truth about management. And
So
they've
what
just been lying to everyone in 33 for years, even though like they went through and killed everyone in Vault 32 because they found out the truth about management.
so they just
Possibly from Lucy and Norm's mom, because it showed that it was her Pip Boy that opened the door.
but why would they leave the bodies?
I don't know. I don't know. That's the only thing that blows a really big hole in that theory for me. But
But
like,
it's definitely something because my thing is it's obvious that Vault 33 or Vault 31, 32, and 33 are the best
right.
because that's where all of Vault Tech at the very actually Hank and Betty were secretary and assistant. Is there a better vault
For Barb and the higher ups.
for the higher ups?
Maybe.
I'm wondering
Maybe.
if so I think that so which means Steph potentially is the daughter of a big guy, or she's also either mid-level management or something. But if that's the case, then I'm like, okay, well, why would Bud be in Vault 31? But I'm wondering if that's because he needs to manage the lesser people. I don't know.
Right. Possible.
I know. Okay, so again, we know that Lucy's Vault does not have to take in the surface dwellers. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that they are breeding stock, but they are part of Vault Tech, essentially. They are the assistants or whatever.
They are Vault Tech's property.
Yeah.
They are the management's property, pretty much.
Basically.
Like they are cattle.
And I loved that. So we know about Lucy is like, at least in her vault, everything is relatively open. Like if she has a question, she'll get an answer. They aren't shying away from sex. They aren't shying away from a lot of things. And But so she's very open when she asks the overseer, hey, why can't we go up to 12 or whatever? And he will not tell her anything. And that starts to like kick like stuff in her mind too, of like, that's not how they do it in her vault. And so what are they hiding now?
Right.
Um, and then we go over to Max and he's so excited to see his armor, but then he starts acting shady again. And I'm like, ugh,
He
Max.
always goes back to it, and like literally, he would not have given the fusion core back to these people later on if Lucy wasn't there to see him do
Oh,
it.
100%. 100%. But I thought it was really interesting because Birdie comes over to him and basically says, oh, like you found our, what were they, electricity or something like that, our
You
power
found
grid,
our fusion core.
fusion core. Yeah. And so like, but she doesn't even seem upset. And she's all like, hey, why don't you go take a hot shower? And I feel
She's
like,
psychoanalyzing the shit out of him.
and I'm like, okay, but what does she see in him? Is this another test subject? And if so, what are they testing these surface dwellers on? Is it again that radiation effect on humans, or I don't know? Because I'm like,
Right.
why wouldn't you be a little upset over this surface dweller next to your like power? And granted, I know that she was a surface dweller, but I'm just like,
Right. And
you
see, I
didn't
think
even
that's
react.
where she's coming from, is that like, she was with her mom in Philly when Shady Sands was bombed. It was
Yeah.
3 days walk away and they could still feel the heat from the blast. And I think that she's like, this is the bitch with the psychology degree in the vault, I feel like. And
Yeah.
she's psychoanalyzing the shit out of Max, but she's like, I wonder if she was in a similar position when they first welcomed her into this vault
Hmm.
and was like, it can be hard for us from the surface
Right.
to trust things even in a safe environment like this. And like the way she's breaking it down, like I kind of wonder if she went through something similar when she first came into this vault before she got indoctrinated into their beliefs and became like one of their inner circle.
Do you think, because you know how they do their random ritual to Moldaver? Do
Right.
you think that she knows that Moldaver is after this property the same way that the Brotherhood is, and she recognizes the armor as belonging to the Brotherhood? And so she's going to manipulate him to try to get information about the Brotherhood. But then I don't know if she's still in contact with Moldaver. I don't
Right.
know.
You
Yeah, I
don't
don't know.
know. You don't know. And like you also don't know, like with Rose as Pip Boy having been the one that opened Vault 32, like you don't know if it was, well, it wasn't the crew of her and her NCR Rangers as raiders coming into the vault and killing the people in Vault 32, because when you go back to that detail, Norm says, the last on that one corpse's Pip Boy, the last biosignal on this was from 2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yep. So we know they were killed 2 years ago. So I'm like, what the hell happened 2 years ago?
Right? Like it wasn't this party that just came through that is the story that Betty is pushing on everybody
Right.
that killed all of them in 32.
Yeah.
They've been dead for 2 years. So if it was the same party of NCR Rangers with Moldaver, they did it 2 years ago.
Yeah. And so it was really interesting because obviously we see Max get his own little apartment and he's really excited about it. He tries the caviar.
Right.
And I'm wondering, is this part of like a science experiment? Do you think it's just regular caviar? Like, do you think it's more like a this
I love how they're
temptation?
giving him aphrodisiacs, though,
Right,
because
the
oysters
oysters,
and
yeah.
caviar, and he's got like champagne in the room with him and this kind of stuff. Like I like that's an awful lot of aphrodisiacs going on there,
Bathrobes.
right? The
Yeah,
hot shower, and he's like,
right.
"What exactly do you mean by a hot shower?" And like how much he's enjoying the hot shower. I think that it could very well be some kind of experiment because these people, the ones who were not surface dwellers, are in fact descended from
Right.
scientists and experiments that, people that scientists experimented on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
it's an interesting theory for
yeah,
sure.
I'm really looking forward to the payoff for it because they're really good at doing that. So then we see Lucy in a classroom, and I actually took notes on the timeline where in 2070, that's when the bombs fall, right? Like
Right.
I think if I
I
remember
think so.
correctly. Okay. So then we have 2142, Shady Sands is founded.
Right.
Then in 2189, the new California Republic is created. And then in 2198, gosh, I don't even know what happens there. I do text to talk and my notes don't, they're not, they're not very good. She become Shady Sands becomes, I think, something because in 2241, the new California Republic becomes the largest economic and political power in California. So I think that in 2198, it becomes the most powerful like city in the new republic or something like that.
Right. I want to
And
know where in this timeline Rose took Norm and Lucy to Shady Sands, because that's where she was with Moldaver when Hank came to get the kids back and then bombed the shit out of Shady Sands.
yeah. And then 2277 is the fall of Shady Sands. And
Right.
so yeah, I mean, I obviously, well, my question is how does Lucy not remember that? You know
Well,
what I
she
mean?
does sort of vaguely remember
Right,
it. I don't know if Norm was technically like, I know Norm's not old enough to remember this stuff,
right.
younger than Lucy, but she says, I thought that the big light in our, like, I thought I could feel the warmth of the sun coming from the big light in our vault, but like that wasn't in the vault. That was when
No.
she was at Shady Sands with her mom, and she was actually feeling the warmth of the sun. But Hank has gaslit her so hard for her whole life and lied to her for so long that like she was a small enough child to not necessarily understand that she had in fact gone to the surface and returned, but she's also been like conditioned to believe certain things.
Yeah, and so I'm just like, because I think that you would remember leaving a vault, like unless she was drugged either by her mom, so they weren't gonna make any
Pranked,
noise,
right?
or by Hank making them forget. Like, and I would
Right.
believe it either way because it makes sense either way.
It does make sense either way. And like I could see him using like some kind of drugs to affect their memory on the
Yeah,
kid after they got home and to like really tell them, this is what actually happened, not what you think happened, blah, 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 and just kind of like burn it into their brains when they're in a vulnerable drugged state until they believe it.
no, I 100%
And it's kind of
agree.
almost not necessarily a Stockholm syndrome kind of thing, but like kind of in that same boat.
Right. Well, and then if it was Hank who potentially did that, it's not only is he pissed off with his wife that he's ending
Right. And
it,
he
but
and Betty together decided to blow Shady Sands off the map and bury Rose
yeah, and I'm thinking
themselves.
they had to take care of that evidence that, what they're teaching in Vault 33 at least is a lie
Is a lie.
because
Yes.
what they're teaching in Vault 4 is actually
My
different.
thing that's driving me crazy though is why is Rose as badly irradiated and hardcore ghoulified as she is, but Moldaver looks exactly the same as she did pre-war?
I
Does
want to
she just
know.
have enough of a steady supply of chems that like she doesn't even physically look like a ghoul, but she is? Like, why is she so long lived and she looks exactly the same? Like, I have so many fucking questions about her.
I do too. I honestly think that she was in a vault.
Right?
Um,
Like I think she was somewhere safe.
yeah,
Hold the fuck up. Hold up, hold up, hold up. Birdie said that her mother was like a courier,
yeah,
right? And they were 3 days walk away from
yeah,
Shady
Shady
Sands
Sands.
when Shady Sands was bombed. What if Moldaver was her mother? And they were in Philly when Shady Sands got bombed. And that is why Moldaver still looks fine. And Rose was back in Shady Sands
Wait,
and
but
got
then,
badly irradiated.
but but Moldaver was pre-war, so she's still 200 years after that, right?
right? But like the ghouls done it with Kim's and all this kind of stuff. But I'm just talking about like during the bombing of
Oh
Shady
yeah,
Sand, though, like just like just completely disregarding the whole pre-war thing, like that particular situation. Why was she not with Rose in Shady Sands? Was it that she was the courier that was in Philly when Shady Sands was bombed?
possibly, possibly. And then, so you just
Or
think
was
that
she off on some kind of mission and Rose was like holding down the fort at Shady Sands when it got bombed? Like there's a lot of options and there's a lot of ways that they could play that. But
was
like for the reason that Moldaver wasn't,
was Moldaver there when Hank grabbed the kids back?
I don't know. Like we don't have any indication one way or the other on that. And I think that there's a lot of interesting ways that they could play this.
Yeah. Um, okay. So let's see. So we see that I love that the bear has two heads.
Me too.
But then we have the weird surface dweller tradition. And what's interesting is it flashes back and forth between Cooper and Lucy during this. And um or no, it doesn't. Sorry. Cooper is a we meet the president, actually.
Right.
So Cooper
And he
takes the fall
pulls the
for Lucy.
finger on.
Oh yeah. He sews the finger on the heart, the little
Right.
heart.
Yes. I
Yep.
love the little heart-shaped loop in the threads as he's sewing Lucy's finger onto his body. Like, you cannot expect me not to ship them when we have moments like this in this show. Like, you just can't. Like, you can't
No.
expect me to not.
Well, what's interesting is that the president, I think his name's Saul Booker, is like, I don't know what keeps you going, or maybe you're still looking for her. And her could mean Janie, it could mean Barb, or it could mean Moldaver.
Right.
But I don't know if it's any of those three. I they don't even know Coop's name because I know that Booker says something like, "Oh, you don't realize like when they said it was a ghoul who shot them up, you didn't say it was the ghoul." And again,
Right.
they don't know Cooper's name. So I highly doubt that they would know about Janie or Barb. But I don't know if it's Moldaver either because he sees the picture of Moldaver hanging in the thing, and Booker didn't seem to know that
That they knew
Cooper
each other.
exactly. So I'm wondering who this her is. Um, I don't know. But they talk about Moldaver, that she is the flame mother. He's such an ass and he's talking about Philly and that guy's dad.
That was so funny,
It
though.
was so
Like,
funny.
he's literally, it's so in control and calculated, and he's saying every word, knowing that he's going to get the reaction he needs to turn this situation around and come out on top.
Oh yeah, he's
Like,
completely
they are
manipulating it.
playing checkers and he is playing chess. It is a completely different game to him, and he is just like pushing their fucking buttons, and I love it.
Yeah. And then he's a badass and he kills the two deputies, but he catches sight of Moldaver's picture on the bounty wall. And he
Right?
specifically says, "That's not how I remember her." And um so we know that, and again, so we have this mirroring of, so Cooper goes, it flashes over to Cooper, pre-war Cooper, and he's going to a church where this meeting is. And he is going to learn something in this church where Lucy
But
is
it's
some,
church or a funeral home. It's a chapel in a funeral home, isn't it?
I don't know. I just know it's some kind, there is religious, like the wall, like the windows.
Iconography.
Yeah, yeah. And I
I
feel
feel
like,
like it's a chapel in a funeral home, and that makes it that much more morbid and interesting.
oh
But I
yeah.
could be wrong, though.
I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to specific of where it is because it looks like a regular building, but he steps into something with the iconography of religion. And obviously what Lucy's experiencing is some kind of religious ritual. So like they're both learning that shit is weird. Again, almost in
At
that
the same
same
time.
at the same
But
time,
like,
but in that same space in a way, because you have this really weird, okay, we're gonna strip down for the flame mother. Like that was so
right? And
weird.
like cover ourselves in the ashes of our dead loved ones from Shady
Right.
Sands.
But
And
what
then the blood must spill and all of that. Like,
yeah,
was
the blood
really
must
brilliantly done, first of
it
all.
it was. I was pissed off at Lucy that like she continues to go along with this until she sees Moldaver's face. Like she kind of unzips her jacket a little bit. She puts on the ash until she realizes like what it actually is. And then she realizes these people are drinking blood. And I'm like, Lucy, when are you gonna start not going with it? And like obviously she's continuing to learn that lesson. But I think that, and I think a lot of it is her time with Cooper, and she's so desperate to prove him wrong that, like,
Right.
no, this is especially in a vault. She does not want to believe that stuff like this could happen in her vault. And yes, it's like you said, the blood must spill. And that's when she finally realizes, okay, shit's weird. Um, and then she goes to Max and she's like, uh, shit's
We should
happening.
go.
We need to leave. And he's all like, I think, oh, my boo-boo, I need to stay for another couple days.
I fucking love though, like scientifically, again, if this is an experiment, seeing just how quickly having all of his needs met in Maslow's hierarchy changes his thought process
Oh, yeah, and his values,
and
like
his
his
decision
priorities.
making. Yes.
Like he's not even worried about the head. Like he does not even need to go get the head right now. He's like, have you tried this? Like I love when Lucy's like the shoot show. I was like, Ella, you
That was
are
adorable.
adorable.
But I also love how quickly having all of his needs met in Maslow's hierarchy has him changing his values in regards to the brotherhood and whether or not you're supposed to have sex because he's eating these oysters and he's like, "Do you want to make my cock explode now?" Which like
I mean, and she's just looks at him like, no, like this
like
is
we
not the
this is a
time.
fucking emergency. This is not a drill. Like we need to go.
And I think that that's a really good point because it's like, look how quickly his loyalties shift when, like you said, all of his needs are met. He's safe. He's taken care of. He knows that he can get more of this. He can go take a shower. It's literally in his apartment. It's hot. Um, and they have power. They have everything that he could possibly want. And he's ready to like his whole life. He's never, I mean, I don't know if he's been tempted by sex at all, but
Right.
he's never done anything and not even a day in, he's like, let's just have sex. And it's just crazy. And then she's like, no, I'm going to do something about this. I need to see what they're hiding. So she walks out and he just kind of stands there and watches her go. Like he's not even concerned. And it's not because, oh, he knows that she's capable. He doesn't believe that she's capable, actually. I do not think at all that he thinks that Lucy is capable. He is just more concerned with getting those needs met. He stays. He wants more of the caviar and the oysters and the, wine.
He
Like,
wants to continue living the good life where his needs are met and things are easy. And honestly, I don't think that he cares if Lucy remains a part of that or not.
no, he doesn't. I don't think so. I think that he likes her. And I think that she likes him. And again, it's that they tick the right boxes. Like for him, she's the girl that he gets to save and all of that. But and for her, it's like that knight in shining armor, that, good guy, that she can grow old and have a family with. But that, again, it's like she cares more about finding out the truth of certain things finally. And he's more of like, I just want my needs met. Like I just want this. And to be fair, like I completely understand it, but it's almost scary how quickly those loyalties jump from thing to place to thing to place or whatever. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
It's amazing how quickly having all of his needs met changes his entire outlook on life. And like valid. I think that that would be the case for anyone.
Yeah.
But I find it interesting that yes, Lucy's having these needs met too, but her need for answers is greater than her need for comfort at this point.
And I like that. I think, and I think to be fair, she wouldn't have woken up if she was in the surface because she could always go back to her vault and know that everything she believed is true. And
Mm.
so seeing all of this stuff in a vault because of the vault, I think that even the timeline, like it's starting to like really bother her and get to her because things are not going the way that she expected from, the way that vault dwellers look to this tradition to all of that stuff. So,
Yep.
so she goes up to 12, and what does she see at 12? Where do we end the episode?
So she's watching video of this experiment where you see the first gulpers born and then they consume their mother, which is like hardcore messaging there. But and she's like looking at all of these experiments and like in her head she thinks, oh, it's the people of Vault 4 are experimenting on these people, and really it's the other way around. And like she starts wrecking shit. She throws acid in an innocent man's face, which I think is like the first thing that affects her in the same way that Cooper is affected in like having to function in the wasteland in the 200 years between, where we see pre-war Cooper and where Cooper is as the ghoul at the beginning of the show. This is the first time that she's making mistaken assumptions and making these choices that harm people because of her beliefs and because she doesn't have all the facts and she is just acting on the information she has at first blush and judging a book by its cover again.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure she recognizes that, like, she flashes back to when Cooper did use her as bait and she saw the fingers and she just thought it was radiation. And then she realizes, no, the vault is responsible for these things. It is not the radiation. Yep. And I think that she just loses her shit because not only does she take on this responsibility, it's like Cooper's right about this. And so we see this as, this is a big, and it'll go into the next episode, but this is basically her black moment, like her realization. And Cooper, again, has that same black moment when he realizes that, like, oh shit, what is my wife doing? And granted, in the next episode, we're going to see him spying because he still can't seem to accept it yet. But even that little shake of Roosevelt not being allowed and him pushing back against Barb and him even attending the meeting, like, he is noticing these things. And it's that absolute shatter of betrayal for him. That's going to be his sort of black moment. Lucy has his. And again, it's that mirroring storyline where they're both going through the same thing at the same time. And Max, he's kind of like, his trajectory is right now like relatively static, like, we don't really
lends credence to my villain theory.
Yes. So what do you want to ask them for comments, Chelsea? What should we ask them?
Okay. Do you think that it was Barb who made the rule that no dogs are allowed in the vaults? Like, do you think that was a decision she made or somebody else made that decision and she's just enforcing it? Because for me, I feel like it was definitely Barb with how hardcore she avoided answering who made that rule when Cooper was asking her about it. So I would love to hear you guys, like, what your theories are on that in the comments.
Definitely. And we will be back for episode 7. So thank you guys for sticking around with us. Have a great one. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.